Good afternoon to those of you in our time zone today, and good whenever to everyone else joining us. I'm Aaron Glass, a professor here at Bard Graduate Center. I'd like to invite you all to this first seminar in our annual series, Indigenous Arts in Transition. Though all of us on Zoom are widely distributed around the world, those of us hosting this event here at Bard Graduate Center are located on the island of Mannahatta in the heart of Lenape-Hoking, the ancestral territory of the Lenni Lenape, and past, present, and future home to many Indigenous peoples, as well as others who have arrived on these shores, both willingly and under duress. I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker, my friend and colleague, Heather Igloliorte, who is the Concordia University Research Chair in Circumpolar Indigenous Arts within the Art History Department at Concordia in Montreal, Canada. She's the co-director of the Indigenous Futures Cluster at the Milieu Institute for Arts, Culture, and Technology, and a special advisor to the Provost for Advancing Indigenous Knowledges. Heather also sits with me on the Faculty Council of the Otsego Institute for Native American Art History. She publishes frequently in journals, edited volumes, and exhibition catalogs. She's edited 2 special issues of Inuit Art Quarterly and has 4 co-edited volumes forthcoming in the next year alone, including Mobilizing Circumpolar Indigenous Cultural Heritage and the Routledge Companion of Indigenous Art Histories in Canada and the United States. Heather has won multiple awards for both teaching and writing. She's been the PI or the co-PI on 23 grant-funded projects since 2013 alone, and she maintains an absolutely punishing schedule of invited lectures and speaking gigs, so we're really pleased that she could be with us today. She's been the lead or co-lead on at least 26 exhibitions, including recently wrapping up her position as the lead guest curator with an innovative team of Inuit colleagues and collaborators of the inaugural exhibition at Qaumajuq, the Inuit Art Center at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the exhibit titled INUA, Inuit Nunangat Ungamutut Ataktitut. Well, see how well I did there. Translated into English as Inuit Moving Forward Together. This opened last March and will be installed until April 2022. Heather previewed this exhibition in our Fields of the Future podcast last year, which you can listen to on Apple Podcasts, and it's the subject of her talk this afternoon. Finally, a quick word on how this event will run. Heather will speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A and discussion. We have a few colleagues joining us as panelists, and we'll start off with their questions, and then we'll turn to those of you in the audience, and we request that you use the Q&A function in Zoom. We do have automatic captioning, which you can turn on using the CC option at the bottom of your screen. We're recording this event, and a copy of the video will be available on our website and YouTube channel afterwards. And now I'm pleased to turn the Zoom controls over to Heather. Welcome, Heather.
Good morning, Ulakut. Thanks, Aaron. What a lovely introduction, and also a little bit humbling. It's great to see. I'm so happy to be here with everyone, and just Tumgatsugitsi, welcome. I'm Dr. Heather Igloliorte, and I'm joining you today I'm actually in Abitibiwan New Media Lab, which is a new media lab in Winnipeg, which is Treaty 1 First Nations territory and also the homeland of the Métis Nation. I don't live here, I'm just visiting. I'm here this week working on another project, and just thrilled to be able to join you virtually while we're still doing this virtual thing. I guess we're doing this forever now. So let's see if I can move my slides forward. There we go. So this is my little talk with you today about curating the inaugural exhibition of the new Inuit Art Center, Qaumajuq. And this is the space that it was in. I'll just start with a brief introduction of myself. I'm from Nunatsiavut. Nunatsiavut is, I hope you can see my cursor, this little, the smallest Inuit territory in the circumpolar world, so over here in this corner, this being all of Inuit Nunat, Inuit Nunangat in Canada, which is just Inuit homelands. So this is Labrador. I'm an Inuk on my father's side. I'm a Newfoundlander on my mother's side. My father, James Igloliorte, was born out on the land somewhere in here, one of these little teeny tiny islands in Shango Bay. And this is, my grandparents are Matthew Igloliorte and Susanna Mitzvik, and this beautiful woman is my grandmother, who was a seamstress. And I'm Today I've been invited to share with you a little glimpse into Qaumajuq, the new Inuit Art Center, which opened at the Winnipeg Art Gallery in Winnipeg, Manitoba in March of 2021. It's actually just across the street from where we are right now. I am the lead guest curator, but I worked on this project with three really amazing emerging curators of various other backgrounds and expertise as well. And we like to arrange ourselves from west to east. Sorry, we like to arrange ourselves from east to west, as you can see in this image. So I'm, excuse me, just one second. Sorry, I'm in someone else's office right now. So I'm here on the east side from the Natsiavut. Next to me is award-winning artist Qaumajuq, who's also been involved in numerous curatorial projects, including working as a part of the curatorial team for the last Venice Biennale representing Canada. Qaumajuq is from Nunavik. Next to them is my colleague, Krista Uliuk-Zawadski. Krista is the curator of Inuit art for the government of Nunavut and also a current PhD student, candidate at Carleton University. And then next to them is Qaumajuq. Qaumajuq is also an award-winning artist who is, sorry, lots going on here. And next to them is Qaumajuq, who is also an award-winning artist and has been a practicing curator for a number of years now and is currently working on a project at the Remi Modern in Saskatchewan. So it's really been a thrilling opportunity to get to work with them. I was actually invited to be the curator, and as soon as I signed my contract, I turned around and said, could I please bring on this other group? Together, we represent all of the 4 Inuit regions of Inuit homelands within Canada, and that was really important to us because we thought that the creation of this new building also create an opportunity for us to think very differently about what an Inuit art exhibition could be and how to be representative in myriad ways that go beyond existing prototypes. So we started working together. Hold on one second. We started working together before the building was even built. So the new Inuit Art Center is a wing of the existing WAG building. Here you can see this is the WAG building here. It is, and this is the space where the Inuit Art Center sits. So this building is kind of shaped like a Star Trek insignia, I think, like kind of a big triangle, and has been referred to by other colleagues as a stone fortress. You can see there's very little windows on the exterior of the building. It is a brutalist architectural building. And when we started, we really just had the plans and the vision of the architect, Michael Maltson. And then we could see the building was coming under construction, but it started in 2017. Of course, the finalization of the building began during COVID. And so we could not travel here. And so we were working on an exhibition in a space that we had never been inside. And so it was really thrilling when we were all able to travel here, quarantine, and then be in the room together, working on the exhibition alongside a number of other Inuit that we brought into the project to work with us as the exhibition designer, as exhibition graphic designers, as our project manager, and through a number of other ways that I'll talk about a little bit. Just here on the screen is Qaumajuq, Qaumajuq, and Krista, and then in the center of the frame is Nicole Luke, who is an architecture student and is, to my knowledge, the first Inuk exhibition designer, and worked very closely with us using SketchUp and floor plans in order to devise a way to work in this space before we had ever been in the building. So it was let's call it a challenge. It was really amazing when we were finally able to get to the space together. In addition to being the inaugural curator, I was also very fortunate to get to be the co-chair of the Indigenous Advisory Circle with my colleague, Dr. Julie Nagum, in whose lab I'm sitting right now, or the lab is kind of out here, I'm in an office. And together we co-chaired the Indigenous Advisory Circle. You can see here, this is the members of the circle in 2018 alongside the CEO and director, Dr. Stephen Boris, who's on the left. And we were a group of Indigenous peoples from all across the many nations of Manitoba, as well as from throughout Inuit Nuranga. Together, we named and renamed spaces within the institution following a long-term process working with elders and language keepers, which was probably one of the most rewarding things of my entire career. Created new Indigenous positions throughout the institution, including the Director of Indigenous Initiatives, and influence the implementation of new policies and procedures that make the institution more accessible, transparent, and responsive to Indigenous community, artists, and others. And so this is the building. This main space is called Igloliorte, but the building itself is called Qaumajuq, which means it is bright, it is lit. And that comes from, as you can see, the way that the new building has been opened up and has become more transparent. And we try to think about that transparency as a bit of a metaphor for how the institution is also decolonizing and changing and becoming more accessible and responsive to the communities, especially those in whose trust they hold the artworks of. And so this is, you can see the visible vault that's been named Igloliorte, which means our relatives. And it really speaks to the way that Inuit feel when they come into the space and they look at these works and know who it is that's in the collections and feel a very deep, close and kinship to them, because we are literally related to the creators of these works and also feel a very close kinship to the pieces themselves. There are only about 75,000 Inuit in Canada. And so this collection of 13,000 works, in all likelihood, an Inuit walking into this building has a living relation who's an artist who's included in this collection, or is related to someone who's related to someone that's included in the collection. And very often people do come in and say, I'd love to see the works from this community or from this artist or from my grandfather or great grandfather. And we really want to bring that relationality into everything that we were doing with the space. This is the main gallery. This is what we had to work with when we were designing the exhibition. This place is called Kilak, which means clouds or sky. And on the right frame, you see that there is a balcony gallery, and that's called Qaumajuq. And these are two different languages, but that also means cloud or refers to the heavens. And so this space is, we were told that it is about the floor space of 2 hockey rinks. And so if you can imagine trying to curate an installation of works in a space that large and of these kind of undulating cloud-like walls with these massive, beautiful skylights in the ceiling that many Inuit have remarked remind them of like seal breeding holes and other things. So this is what we had to work with. And then this is how the space looks today. The ceilings are 3 stories tall, and there are almost no straight lines or flat walls in the entire space. So it was an interesting challenge to work with. It's also because of the scale of the space. Sound was quite a major challenge to work with. We had a lot of artists that were using sound. And then of course, on top of it being an issue that the acoustics themselves were difficult, we also had the secondary barrier of opening an exhibition during COVID and knowing things like you cannot be asking people to put on headsets. So that was something that we early on discovered was going to be a challenge for us to address, was how do we have people have this, the audio experience, to have a really holistic experience of the exhibition, while they could not, there was like a lot of things that had to be adjusted under these unusual conditions. So, hold on, go here. So now I thought I'd do something that I haven't done before, so bear with me while I take us into the 360 tour. Because we were opening during COVID again, we thought that maybe it would be really important to be able to have a virtual opening and to have a virtual experience at the exhibition, because we didn't know how long it was going to run, when it would have to close, how many people would be able to travel in person. All of this was decided pre-vaccine rollout. And so we worked really hard to have an interesting virtual interface for this. And so I thought I'd take you through the latter half of my presentation by taking you here. And this is just, if you go to wag.ca, you can find this. It's obviously the Inuit online platform. But here we go. Excuse me for a moment. So this is the only painted walls that are not white inside the entire building for this opening. And we it was really important to us that we paint this space a bright springtime green. And that is because as the Inuit curatorial team, we know that we are working with and through and sometimes against the history of the exhibition of Inuit art, which is also, of course, a reflection of Inuit culture. And we know that Winnipeg, even though it's to many people watching, I'm sure you think of it as a cold and northern city, to Inuit the south. And the audiences here may or may not be familiar with Inuit culture, art, language, practice, landscape. And so it was really critical to us that we emphasize the fact that in the north, we do have 4 seasons. Some of them are longer than others, but that there is life that teems throughout the Arctic, and that is critically important for us to share. And so we started with these two works. Oh, I'm zooming in faster than I wanted to there, sorry. We started with these two works. This is in the foreground here. This is Mata Kayaks, a Mauti, to show you here, that we commissioned specifically for the show. There's actually 15 commissioned pieces in the exhibition, and this includes this work, which is covered in sealskin flowers and speaks really to our flourishing culture, as she calls it. She notes it here. Mata is an emerging artist, but a very established fashion designer. And so her foray into wearable art is really exciting for us. And since that time, she's gone on to create a number of other really significant works that have been shown in exhibitions. Behind this work, we have the backdrop of Ruth Qaumajuq's Four Seasons of the Tundra. And if you, I'm just gonna like indulge me to get in as close as I can here to show you some of this some of the embroidery here. Just really, really incredible embroidery that speaks to the flora and fauna of the Arctic. You know, we don't have trees in most places. We are above the tree line, but we do have a very flourishing, vibrant spring and summertime that comes with all the different changes in nature that we wanted people to understand before they entered into the big white space of the rest of the gallery. So it was really critical to us that we have this holding space before you walked into the big expanse, because we're super conscious of not wanting to give the impression that like this big white space, the Arctic is a vast barren space. On this over here, I'll move in a little bit closer. The other thing that we thought was really important to ground the exhibition in is our own ancestors and our connections and relations that are on that longer continuity of intergenerational transmission. And so each of the works that you see here relate to one of the four curators directly. So this set of dolls is made by Qaumajuq's grandmother. This carving, this walrus carving, hold on, I'll show you the whole piece here. This single tusk carved was made by Krista's great-grandfather. These dolls were made by Sineak's very famous great aunt, very famous doll maker. And then this purse, oh, I went past it. This purse, this purse is made by my great-grandmother, my grandmother, Susie Mitsuku, who I showed you a picture of earlier. She obviously doesn't want us to have a close look at her purse here. There we go. And so this piece came into my life by chance. Someone reached out to me over Twitter and said, hey, I think I have something that your grandmother made, and sent me these photos, and I instantly recognized her beadwork. And it's just been such a joy to get to see something like this in the collection. She made all of her money for her family by sewing and selling things. And so there's not a lot of stuff in our family that's made by her. And so it's really, really special that this has come back to us now. So that's the sort of opening space of the exhibition. I won't talk about every work, obviously, but I'll show you around a little bit and talk about some of the curatorial strategies that we employed. So this is a work of poetry by Jessie Kleeman, who is a Greenlandic Inuk. This poem stretches from the top to the bottom of the space. You can see Kleeman is a performance artist and a poet, and it was really important to us that we don't just focus on Inuit art in Canada. We have long been separated from and disconnected, not even just from countries outside of Canada that have Inuit, that have our Inuit relatives, but we've also been separated province to province and territory to territory. And so one of the things that as a curatorial team we emphasize as being really important to us all the way through this process was to start to unify Inuit again and to really think beyond interior and exterior borders and boundaries, and to bring us back together and think of us as the title says, Inuit moving forward together. And so this is the other thing that we were talking about, is like wanting to create spaces. It was very, very important to us that we emphasize that our primary audience was for Inuit. We know that the majority audience will not be Inuit to visit this exhibition, but we wanted Inuit who walked into the gallery to say, oh, this is by Inuit and for Inuit first. We do not have text on the walls for that reason. I will talk about what we did instead in a little bit, but it was an important strategy for us to bring in signifiers that Inuit would find familiar. And so one of the first is this structure. This is the installation by Zacharias Kunuk and the Asuma team, My Little Corner of Canada. We'll walk around it later, but I'll just take you inside now. So this is on the outside, it is a not an exact replica, obviously. They have doors in the north, but this is, it's inspired by Zacharias Kunuk's hunting cabin, his hunting shack in the woods. And so your outside of the building looks like the shack. And then when you travel inside, let's see if I can do this masterfully here. Inside is a 4-channel video installation, which tells the story that begins, it's a little bit abstract, but it begins out on the land with an elder talking to children and then ends up inside finally from this sort of beautiful expansive space out on the land around Igloliorte, where Zacharias lives and works, and into the mining consultations that become quite tense. And it really reminds us what it is that we give up when we allow resource extraction to take place on our lands, and when we do not have the power to not allow resource extraction to take place on our lands. As you walk through this work, and of course, Zacharias Kunuk, he was the artist, or Asuma were the artists who represented Canada at the last Venice Biennale. So they're as major of an Inuit artist as you have working in Canada today. But it was also really important for us to highlight intergenerationality, as well as to support emerging artists alongside senior artists, alongside elders. And so you come out of this work and you see this work by Qaumajuq, who is perhaps the youngest artist in the show. He's still in art school. And he is a painter from Nunatsiavut. And he's done this diptych, the warm-up shack, that depicts 2 warm-up shacks, which are quite common in Labrador, of course, quite cold in the north. One side shows his father at their shack out on the land where he's about to go hunting, and the other side shows him at his his former position working for the hydroelectric dam, where his job was to tend the never-ending garbage fire that was outside of the space. And so we talked about it, and I was like, it's so visceral. And he said, this was what my life was, like going home and visiting and being out in nature, and then being back at work, needing to have this employment and feeling this sort of push and pull from the 2 sides of what was happening in his lifestyle. This is a very common experience for a lot of Inuit who have no choice but to work in industries that, because of the what's available to them. And I know that I could talk about every single work in the show, of course, so I'm going to try to do this in, Erin, if you could pop on and tell me how many minutes I have left, because I wasn't watching from the moment that we started. When would you like me to?
Take your time. We got heaps of time.
Okay.
You take another 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, okay,
10,
that
15
sounds
minutes,
great.
leisurely.
I'll show you as much as I can show you in 10 minutes. So what we're looking at here is the rest of the space. You can see that we've created 2 other sort of vignettes, as well as a wall back here, and I'll talk a little bit about Nicole's design. But it was really important for us to bring collections together, as well as to commission new works. These works by Bronson were commissioned, the works by Asuma were commissioned, and many others in the space. But we also really wanted to bring together things that are from this longer history of Inuit art and bring them into conversation with contemporary art today, knowing that a lot of audiences coming into this building in particular, but kind of any Inuit art exhibition in general, may be surprised to see that Inuit artists are making many, many kinds of things and working in what we would consider to be a contemporary art installation, performance, new media kind of milieu, instead of the things that we typically think of and which are most represented in collections, which is, sculptures, prints, and drawings. And so we wanted to bring that all together and really introduce people to the idea that Inuit art is anything made by an Inuk, and that this is as expansive as artistic practice itself. So a great example of that, we'll just come around the side of the shack here, and I'll see if I can get a good angle on this work next to me. And then I'll just turn this around here, hold on. That's where the bathrooms are. So this is Matusi Ayutuk, he's from Nunavik, and this work, the title translates to The Mermaid That Can Travel on Land. And this is a motorcycle sidecar made with Etienne Guy in Quebec that he actually performed by doing donuts at a performance art outside of the space. And it is an incredible mermaid-like mixed media found object sidecar that we have parked in the space. There is a sign on it that says no touching, but the day that it opened to the public, there were footsteps all over this platform. I think people can't help themselves but to want to get really close to it. This work speaks, I think, to some of the works that are over next to it. These are works by Drew Michael. These 4 sculptures and masks are made by an artist from Alaska, and Drew Michael's works are very self-reflective. He's one of the openly LGBTQ2S members of, or artists that are participating in the exhibition. We have some who are out and some who are not. And it was really important to us to be very inclusive and also extremely respectful of gender and sexuality balance in the side of this exhibition. It is a sad reality that there is still a number of, it's still very difficult to be out in the Arctic because you're in a very small community and you're isolated. It's not necessarily safe always to be out. And there is a lot of heavy influence of Christianity still in many of our communities, which makes it a very contentious topic. And so we were very conscious of going out and looking for people that were out and willing to be identified as being a part of this exhibition in such a way, not because of the content of their work, but rather because it was important to us to make a statement to the broader community that our community is incredibly inclusive and that we value and celebrate all people. There's another series upstairs. I think I can get upstairs with this and I'll show you a little bit more about it. But we've been saying, to our knowledge, it is the queerest exhibition of Inuit art that has ever been. But of course, we don't know what wasn't written into history books and what was left out in decades past. And so this is really important to us that it starts to begin a conversation that can help to broaden that out and create a safer space in the art world and in our own communities for LGBTQ Inuit, especially youth. So I won't go back to this installation, but there's a really beautiful installation. Well, maybe I will just do this one work. So this is a beautiful installation of works related to our marine or sea and ice culture. So there's a lot of fishing, hunting, and trapping works here. And this one is one I really, really love. This is a digital media work that is part of here and contextualizes some of the other sculptural works in the collection that were shown here. This is Megan Kayak Monteith's Whale Hunt. I think everyone is here. It's actually created in an incubator with Glam Collective, which is another organization that I'm a part of. But these are stop motion animations on paper with oil pastels, glass, and oil paint. And so this is a stop motion painting of people eating maktak, which is like whale skin and blubber. And then it loops to another video of flensing a whale on the beach, which are done in the same kind of a style. So she's an artist who started out as a oil painter and then now is doing this really interesting new digital media practice. So I thought I'd spin around and share that one with you quickly. Let me take you over to, let's go to the interior. You can see that we did this. You know, the great thing about having 3 stories of walls is that you can do massive salon style wall hangings and also include, for example, this 20 foot long drawing by Alyssa P. Ishalutak, who's an elder who drew this on the floor in the studio in Pangnirtung and had this purchased by Curator of Inuit Art, Darlene Coward-White. So very, very exciting to have these massive installations in context with each other. So over here, we have the 2 other installations that are in the space. You'll probably see it from here if I turn around. This work is by Lindsay McIntyre. Put the label for you here. Oh, we are all different. Lindsay McIntyre's installation. This is a sound animation and animation installation. I'll turn off the label just so you can experience the whole thing. So this is a recreation of Lindsay's grandmother's kitchen / living room, and we had to do this during COVID as well. So she was very specific around, she sent all of the copies of all of the photographs and documentation things that are on the wall. And if you step inside the space, you see that this is very much like any Inuk walking in here is going to say, oh, this is just like my aunt's kitchen. This is just like my Anansiak's kitchen. And, you know, you've got, so we're trying to create this sort of 1960s space that wasn't necessarily, that may not be set in the 1960s, but that has not changed since the 1960s. And I think you're all familiar with that kind of a feeling. There are audio components hidden inside of the installation itself. So you're invited to come in and actually sit down and watch what's happening on the TV, which does not have sound, but then you hear the sort of the second a parallel running audio track that plays out of a couple of hidden places. There's a speaker inside of the lamp. There's a speaker inside of the stereo here and some other places. And it tells the story of her, and now I may get this wrong, I believe it was her uncle, who is a man who, I'm going to tell this story wrong because I didn't look it up, so maybe I won't, but Kiviak, her uncle, who had his name changed in residential school and then fought to have it returned to his original name. He was changed to David Ward. He grew up to be a famous boxer and then a lawyer, and he used his knowledge and training in order to, as it says in the poster on the left here, Inuk wins back the right to go back to using his one-word name. So it actually, even though it is an installation and it's very much about movement and travel and the sound, it's not all one piece. It is of an installation, but there's really important things happening throughout this installation. This is a really amazing work here too. This is Cousine van Hoovelen's sealskin hooked rug. It is, it's more like the scale of a whale. It's 12 feet by 9 feet in size, the sealskin rug, and just massive. I was like, I really want to just roll on it, but obviously it's not going to happen in the near future. This is a piece made by an artist who is working in monumental scale and also very closely into miniature scale. And so Cousine is a really brilliant contemporary artist who we're thrilled to have commissioned this work for the show. And I really could do this with all the works, but I'm conscious of time. This is Siko Alulu's poem Akia, and it's entirely written in, let me see how close we can get, in letters in sealskin. Oh, no, we're just piling right past it. Brian Adams from Alaska photo installation. I will say just a little bit about this case and this wall. You can see that these are in, or maybe you can't see, but they're in the shape of Ys. And that is a shape that the designer Nicole Luke developed to become the installation motif that repeats throughout the exhibition. And it's based on our tattooing practices. And so these are lines that refer to ancestors. And so we were trying to build through that kind of Inuit content all the way through the exhibition space itself. This is the other work by Megan Monteith. And I'll just take you over here. This is a sort of a sculptural gallery of works that have been incredibly important to the history of Inuit art that are in the collection and significant to us as well. And then right here is one of the final sort of built spaces. It's also the shipping container, which is ubiquitous in the Arctic. And inside of this is the work by Glenn Gear. There's another commissioned work where he did a mural, and then the inside that circle is a portal that plays an animated video that he's created. So now I'm going to try to fly through the air. Can I get up? Or do I have to take the stairs? Maybe I do. Get out this way. It would be great if we could have flown. All right, so the last part of the exhibition is in the Kisik Gallery, which is up in this space. I don't want to fly off the balcony here. And up here, it's really beautiful because we have an opportunity to really explore some themes with a little bit more intimacy. This is the Waiting for the Shaman by Maureen Gruben. It's a stunning piece of an installation of polar bear finger bones in resin. And that's contextualized here. You can see that there are, we have a very interesting and dynamic history of ceramics, which is little known, I think, to the world, but there's a really flourishing community in Rankin Inlet of ceramics decades ago, and that still is maintained to this day. And so we wanted to really celebrate that history as well. And so there's a little bit more of 3D work up here. This is Neap Saunders installation. This is one of the ones that was really challenging because it came with its own plinths that had headphones built into it like that. It was a part of the work. And we had to reconsider how to do these pieces because they are each sculptures that take the abstract form of throat songs, which the artist sings. And so instead we embedded speakers into these new plinths that we built so that the sound comes up one at a time rather than you having to put on headphones and you can hear the song for the various different kayaks. Large-scale digital photography with Eldrin Allen and photogrammetry. There's a work by Gukinuka, who is a Greenlandic artist and also a ceramicist. So there's a contemporary work that we put in contact with the collections. Here are the stunning photographic series, again, returning to the LGBTQ theme. This is the series by Jenny Irene Miller, who traveled Alaska documenting experiences of being LGBTQ2S in the North. So this is a portrait series with personal testimony. This is an excerpt from a much larger series. You can find them all on her website. The Sealskin Spacesuit, which was a major undertaking. This is a really amazing piece by Jesse Tungelik, who was inspired by a number of different things that kind of came together in the confluence of this spacesuit. And that is, first of all, his experience of being a child and being out in the tundra in his traditional clothes and hopping around and kind of pretending that he was playing on the surface of the moon. But also, you know, one of the things that he talked about really clearly is that he was saying, you know, I was talking when we started with the Bronson-Jock installation paintings, and I was saying that, you know, it's a reality for a lot of people in the North that they have to, in order to work and to support and feed their families, they have to take on kinds of careers in resource extraction, other areas where they maybe would not choose to if they had more options. And of course, that's very limited in the Arctic. And so Jesse was saying, you know, when he was young, there was always a push to go into the trades or to go into mining or to go into areas like that. Like, and he was saying, like, why is no one saying that we could be astronauts, that we could be, you know, anything that we want to be? So this is a really powerful piece. And it was done with community and in the consultation with lots of seamstresses. It was really collaborative. And then I will end with this beautiful work by one of the elders that we commissioned to be a part of the exhibition. This actually gives you a bit of an eye onto her amazing tapestry skills. So wall hangings are, of course, a very important part of Inuit culture. And so this is Fanny Avatituk's piece Untitled on Nunavut. And this is an incredible wall hanging that she's made with just the most amazing embroidery all throughout. I wish you could get up to the sort of, ooh, that's weird, the like kind of micro. Whoa, we're sliding. Oh, we fell down to the first floor. All right, we're back on the ground. I think maybe that is a great place to end there. I feel like I hit all the points that I want to talk about, including the intergenerational aspects, the fact that we center Inuit audiences, that we're concerned with climate change and particularly what's happening in the Arctic right now. And then also the final thing that I will say is that and I'll take you out to the site to show you just briefly, please do visit the audio guide. So I run a project called Inuit Futures in Arts Leadership. It's a 7-year partnership grant that seeks to train Inuit into careers in the arts. So it sort of comes back around to that, like wanting people to just see that there are more opportunities for them outside of you know, those kinds of things that have been prescribed, and really wanting to provide training and mentorship in a way that is meaningful and culturally relevant so that people see that they can also work in this field. And so we have, every year we have between 10 and 20 or so Inuit from all across Inuit Nunavut working in the North and South at institutions. It's a training and mentoring kind of a program. And for this year during COVID, we created this audio guide that everyone sort of selected works that they wanted to talk about and then wrote their own perspective on them. Some of them are really art historical, some of them are really personal, some of them are funny, they're all engaging. And I'll just play this one short video for you and then we'll conclude here. This is like a little taste of what's in the audio guide. Can you hear that? Quiet.
This mobile work was created with the idea that it's not the spectator who walks around the sculpture. Matusi actually performed this piece at the Biennale, driving around the visitors.
Hi, Nancy Saunders Nguvunga. Hi, my name is Nancy Saunders. I go by the artist name Neap. The first time I worked with soapstone, I liked the idea of trying to carve things that are intangible. The idea came to me where I wanted to see what it would look like if I tried carving throat singing.
Megan shows two aspects of the same important and fundamentally Inuk thing to do, sharing food. The harvest of the massive whale and the sharing of bite-sized pieces of muktak is one and the same.
A spirit is an intermediary between worlds. They alternate, connecting human and animal, the hunter and the hunted, what is seen and unseen.
It's not always easy to get back home to visit, but when you do, you make the most of it. There you go now. You know it's where the sugar and the milk are. You just have to make it how you likes it.
Inuit stories often feature transformation, how humans could transform into animals and animals into humans, referring to a time when we were all the same, living together.
After a day of playing in the snow, we would return home, walking through the door to the aroma of boiled carrots, potatoes, cabbage, and freshly caught fish.
As long as the Inuvialuit exists, it is possible for the Untitled to return to our way of life, to resume their role in our communities, to reclaim their place that was taken from them and from the Inuvialuit. And so, we are waiting for the Untitled to return.
I'm just so incredibly proud of the project that all of the, they're not all young people, but mostly young people working on Inuit futures across the country did manage to put together in a very high level quality that came out of that process. And it really does speak to what we've been trying to do together throughout this whole exhibition, which is to bring in more and more Inuit voices and to continue to decenter myself in the process of doing this work, and to make sure that there are lots of other people who feel like they also are have ownership over and are part of and have meaningfully contributed to this, and can also take that forward and to do and to sort of be Inuit everywhere in what we're doing, so that it's not, it doesn't feel like it's this little thing that can't be shared anymore, but that it feels really expansive, and that all of the possibilities that are available to everyone else are also available to Inuit no matter where they live. And yeah, so that's the tour. I know I went a little bit over, Aaron, but I've got nowhere else to be for a little while, so I'm happy to answer questions as long as you have them. Nakumi, thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Heather. That was amazing. Yeah, we've got about 15 minutes or so for questions. So I will invite my fellow panelists to unmute themselves and to turn their cameras on, and we'll give them sort of, I have tons of questions. I'll give my colleagues a chance to chime in. And for those of you who are joining us not on the panel, please submit questions using the Q&A function, and I'll monitor those and relate those questions to Heather. So for my fellow panelists, if you want to wave your actual hands around or raise your virtual hand, maybe while you're formulating your first questions, Heather, was that you mentioned early on that you didn't have wall labels, and was the audio guide the primary alternative to the wall labels? And if so, how were people encouraged to sort of access it in the gallery, or were they told about it and suggested to like view it afterwards? What was the relationship between the audio guide and the visitor experience?
So for the first little while, the exhibition was only accessible virtually. It wasn't open to the public, and then it was opened for probably about a month with time ticketed viewing, that before we were able to get the audio guide out because of COVID. And so now that it is in the space, it is just QR codes that you can scan in the space on not individual works, but in the exhibition itself. And so you can walk around with your own device. Unfortunately, again, we can't really give out devices right now, which is another thing that you would do in a typical, gallery or museological experience. But now that's like the sharing of technology that you put to your ear is not something that people are comfortable doing. And so we've been using the audio guide as the main interface. And I really like it because it's not what I think about the works. It's not what my other co-curators. I mean, we've each taken a couple of pieces as well, and you might have noticed that there were some artists that also did some of their own, and it may continue to grow. We're still, you know what I mean? It's still kind of in development, but we really just like that it was so multivocal and that it wasn't about any one particular perspective, but showing that there are lots of different ways that Inuit think about these things.
Thanks. I'll call on my colleague Ivan, ask his question.
Thanks, Aaron. And thank you very much, Heather. It's a great project. It's wonderful to see it come to this stage. I have two questions, which are apparently not related, but one is a curatorial one. And this is to do with wall color. And I was really interested in the way in which you described the green in one part of the gallery that you had prepared. But then you described the white that predominates as barren. And I'm wondering whether you had any choices in this matter, or whether as a contemporary art space, you were constrained by the expectation that, oh yes, it's contemporary art, it has to be white, and which is absolutely terrible. And I think we should resist at every point. But I wondered if you had any choice there. The second is, you showed a map in your introductory remarks about the circumpolar region. And I know that this is specifically about Inuit peoples and cultures, but I just wondered to what extent you might have had or be preparing relations with cousins in Siberia.
Those are two great questions. So I will say that it was actually a bit of a battle, not much, but it was definitely a discussion to get even the green in the space, not because the architect was trying to evoke a particular kind of a feeling with the whiteness, but I think because, I mean, I did joke with the director, can we paint that big wall black? He was, you know, just to like make the preparators lose their minds. But we knew that it was always going to be all white. It was actually a bit of a challenge to get the green painted inside of that space, because we really had to make that conceptual argument that it's so important, because what we were trying to do is confront people's stereotypes before they even enter into the space. So we need this, like, we need to really like hit them with it. Like, here are flourishing plants in the Arctic in the summertime, you know, like trying to convey that part, because we knew then as soon as they walk out into that space, even if it's not the curatorial intent or the architect's intent, some people are going to say, oh, we're inside of an iceberg, we're inside of a snowdrift, we're inside of a, you know, and that's actually not like that. I actually really love, I've never heard the architect say it's an iceberg or something like that. I think actually the term that the Indigenous language keepers came up with it, that speak to it as being like a cloud, I think that's actually much more what it feels like inside. It's not cold, even though it's a huge space. It's you know, it's not a big cold cavern. It actually feels like light and airy, and with those massive 8 foot wide skylights, you really do feel like you just have space to breathe. And, you know, I was also really excited to think about when Inuit artists get to come into that space and visit, and to think like, oh, I can make work really big here. You know, I can really scale my own work. If you think about artists who have to think about having to ship and create things from the north to come into the south, that really does constrain the size, the dimension, the weight, the fragility of Inuit art. And so like having an opportunity to come here and make work in the space, there's a bunch of new studios, they're all spectacular, that really I hope is going to continue to change and influence new developments in Inuit art. So we did not have a choice about the wall color and the rest of the space. I think that the architect really wanted people to come in and to be able to really have that wow kind of a feeling. It's also why we didn't put up a bunch of little dividing walls, and we thought we need to come up with a different strategy in here. So if we have like structures that are like architectures of the north, the informal architectures of the north, then people will not see it as broken up into a bunch of little spaces, but will be able to experience the beauty of the space for the first time before it becomes, you know, normal or like a part of our regular consciousness, to really just like experience the building, and then to also appreciate everything inside of it, so that they weren't competing. So there was a lot of things that were happening, that we were doing there. The second part of your question is, we did have one Siberian artist who was supposed to be in the show, and they withdrew their work because of the borders, speaking of borders, because of the borders training, to get things in through, they're actually a Siberian artist that was based in Alaska, and their work was held up at the border, or was told it would be held up at the border because of it being out of a walrus and whalebone, so ivory. And they were told actually that there were some forms that they could fill out if they would just demonstrate that they, had acquired the materials ethically, and the artist refused. And so I actually really respected what they decided to do there. We almost put in a work, we started to have a conversation about maybe even putting a work about the refusal, but it ultimately didn't work out. And so there are those very real borders and challenges to getting works made by Inuit artists who are working in natural materials. And from animal ivory that is not endangered, but it is, but of course there's a bigger global context at work there that unfortunately kept us out of that. The other thing is that I've also, I'm the chair of Circumpolar Indigenous Arts, not just Inuit Arts. And I've done a lot of projects. I had a major exhibition that just finished touring that I co-created with two of my brilliant PhD students, Amy Prouty and Chris Yvonne Haringa, called Among All These Tundras. And that's a show with contemporary Inuit and Sami artists. And so that was just touring across the country and ended its tour in New Zealand during COVID 2020. So it's we are also very concerned about bringing these conversations in together. And that's part of some other research projects that we're doing now, is trying to develop those relationships and projects, because there's a lot that we have to talk about, I think. So just thank you. Those are two great questions.
Thank you.
Hi, Helen.
Your invocation of New Zealand is the clear segue to inviting Helen to ask her question.
Hi, Heather, that was just amazing. Thank you so much. My question comes from my own experience in New Zealand. Clearly, Indigenous languages have had a really big role to play in the way that you've indigenized the space, right? That you talked about the language keepers and their role in naming the different parts of the space, different elements of the space. You showed us a little of the website and the sound installation too. I wondered if you could talk about the way that you've configured the wall labels in particular to incorporate Indigenous languages, and any other elements of that I might have missed.
There are so many that we talked about, all kinds of different options for including Inuktitut, or what's now called Inuktitut, throughout. There's not just one Inuit language in Canada. There's actually one in Nunatsiavut and one that's very specific and only two people speak it in Rigolet in one community. There are, two in Nunavik. There are three major language groups in Nunavut, but there's more. There's two major mid-language groups in the Inuvialuit region. And I have done projects where we have had everything translated into everyone's specific language. But we decided early on for this project, aside for a couple of key elements, that we would go with the language under 1/3 of Nunavut, which is below us and sort of the direct connection to where we are. Winnipeg is the gateway to the north for the community of like Rankin Inlet and a few other in this same sort of 1/3 of Nunavut. And it was really critical to us that we respect who the local Inuit community is here in Winnipeg. And so most of them are from there or travel through this region. And so we wanted the Inuit, who are the majority of people who would come and visit the show, to have everything in their language. And so it does come first. I can see that my screen behind me, but we put the syllabics first and then the English afterwards. And that's the same way that it is throughout the space. We also, it was a big challenge with the audio guide, because we were saying, and we did do some sort of translation, but then it's like, we had, a Ilinaktuit, or like one of the mentees on the project, who may be from Nunavut, but they chose a work that's from Nunatsiavut. So should it be in the artist's dialect or should it be in the speaker's dialect? So we did go back and forth and all that kind of stuff. It is the ITK, Inuit Tapir Kanatami, which is our national Inuit organization. They are working on one version of Inuktitut. They did this in Greenland decades ago, and it has really strengthened the language, even though of course there's some things that you lose when you do that process. So we're maybe at the beginning of it now, but we're not there yet. And I'm not a language speaker. I'm a learner, very much so. My father is a residential school survivor, and so he didn't speak much Inuktitut at home. And so I'm learning it as an adult, and it's a very complex but very beautiful language. Did I answer all of your questions around how language is included. I have a lot of Maori friends, and I love going and being on their land because their welcomes are so beautiful that I always feel like, do I have to sing something now? Like, you do. Yeah. To sing back. It's so amazing to be in Otoroa.
Emily.
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for this. I have a question about, I'm going to try and make it succinct, but about institutional process and project process. And I'm wondering about the ways in which often when you're doing something that's a kind of a reimagining, those can come into tension. And I guess I'd love to hear a little bit about how the way that the exhibition was made had to adapt to what was being made. You know, I think we have a way of making exhibitions at BGC, and like it's always very exciting when a project challenges the way that we do that and asks us to sort of reimagine certain elements of the process. And I'm wondering if there were moments in the process where some reimagining around like institutional process had to happen, and what that looked like.
That's a great question. So everybody on the curatorial team is also a member of the Indigenous Advisory Circle, which myself and, well, that's not Julie, she was in the background momentarily a little while ago, which myself and Julie chaired, but of course there's a lot of really incredible people around that table, and including elders and some youth as well, and also Inuit from other countries, but who live in Canada. And so we started very early on wanting to invite the institution to change some of its practices and to put some key people in place, because, you know, unless you have Indigenous peoples on the board of directors, and I mean, everyone here knows this, unless you have Indigenous peoples on the board of directors and on, you know, in senior management positions and in leadership positions and in public facing positions, then, you know, like an exhibition can only do so much. And then it's really like, what can the institution do that is going to build in long-term change and really work on those, you know, what we're trying to do with decolonial processes and bringing these things in. You know, right now we're working with people move from institutions, people, you know, people roles change. And so wanting to really impact policy and trying to work on making those kind of structural changes, as, you know, I wouldn't say that we did lots and lots and lots of that kind of thing, you know, like there are institutional things that have to be, or don't have to be, but currently are being observed. But we did try to work on putting key people in places and to creating positions that helped to sort of foster that going forward. I remember we had this really incredible conversation, the first circle meeting back in 2017, when we brought everyone together for the first time. We had hired a student to come in, an Indigenous student who happened to work like 5 hours a week at the WAG, who came in to do the note-taking for the session. And on the third day, after everyone had been talking about all their ideas, like, oh, we should do this and we can do that, we can commission artists, we can have public sculptures, we can make we can do the naming process, all of the kind of ideas that we were just throwing out in the beginning. And on the third day, the student who was working, we invited her to say what her experience was like working at the WAG. She worked in education and she would like do tours of exhibitions from now and then. And it, you know, we're just saying like, oh, you haven't had a chance to speak. Would you like to say something? And she told us about being in education and seeing some people who were volunteers give tours, and to say things that were just kind of stereotypes or misinformation that circulated about Indigenous peoples, and just kind of making, like, hearing people saying incorrect things in the context of giving a tour of Inuit art or the other Indigenous art in the gallery, and how painful that was, but also how damaging it could be. And just thinking about, like, how do we train our volunteers, and what are we doing that is giving them the foundation so that they are first, like, not doing any harm in the creation of their exhibition. And for me, it personally changed the way I do training for the people who will be like the sort of front line of engaging with visitors at the exhibitions. You know, I used to do this sort of like, here's the high level conceptual thing, and here's all the little details about the artist. And now when I do it, I say like, okay, so what do we know about the North? You know, we just like start from that baseline and say like, what do we know about people? What do we feel comfortable saying? Here's an artwork where you can talk about this kind of part of Inuit culture, you know. And so we really tried to make some shift. Like, I think the shifts were institutional, but they were also very personal, and just the way that we were going about our work together. I don't know if that addressed your question entirely. I think that we were reimagining things all the time. It's like, now it's COVID and now the building's not opening. And by the way, the acoustics are really hard. And like, you know, it felt like an everyday reimagining getting to the opening of this building. But and also like the curatorial team hadn't seen each other. And we were finally in the building all together in January. Like it was the whole process was pretty intense. I was really fortunate that I wasn't fortunate to be on sabbatical in 2020, but I was on sabbatical through all of 2020, my first. And so I was fortunate to be able to get permission from the university to travel here and be here in person. And I think that was really critical, just to you know, it's one thing to look at a massive floor plan on SketchUp. It's another thing entirely to be at the space and deciding like where the crane needs to put the shipping container and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that totally answers it. And I'm really into what you just said about institutional change also being like very personal, and that actually we're all collections of people. And so it is deeply personal in so many ways, and it can often be small, but potentially very transformative in that.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
How you approach the educators or the volunteers. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just say Emily too posted into the chat the link to the podcast that Heather and I did last year, so you can access that link to hear a little bit more about how this fits into larger kind of work and some of the other projects you mentioned. We have we're almost out of time. We have one quick question in the Q&A, which is, will it be a permanent exhibition, or will any permanent aspects of it last after March or April of next year?
So the project that I'm here working on is that I'm leading the next Inuit Studies Conference, which is planned to be in person in April 6th to the 9th of 2021. And that is the closing weekend of INUA. So we didn't know when we started when it would actually close, but we're thrilled that we get to potentially have an in-person conference here at Qaumajuq at the University of Winnipeg. And so that'll be the big final thing. We couldn't have a big in-person opening, although we did do this huge televised event, which I think actually ultimately turned out to be really fortuitous for us because it had a massive reach. But now we get to be in person and bring the artists in and celebrate everyone together in the space. And I'm really, really thrilled for the artists to get to see their own works and for the students to come in and listen to themselves on the audio guide in front of the work that they've only seen through a screen until now. So that should be really exciting. One of the other positions that we hired for was the assistant curator of Inuit art, who is Jocelyn Parainen, who is an Inuk, and that's the first full-time Inuk employee in curatorial here at the WAG. So they're really excited to have Jocelyn here. And so she, you know, I'm excited to see what she's going to do in the space. It's not a permanent exhibition. I'm actually very excited about how it will change and grow. I don't think that everyone's going to do these like massive full gallery 100 artist shows going forward. I think that we'll at some point have to put in some temporary walls from time to time, but otherwise it's going to be some bare shows. I think it's huge, 2 hockey rinks. But I'm really looking forward to seeing the new things that come into the space, because it's just a stunning gallery to be in, and I look forward to curating something else in a couple of years.
Great, thanks. People are going to have to start going off to class and stuff. I've one sort of final question, which takes us back to Ivan's first question and to the color of the walls and the art institution. And when you were talking about when you first started answering Ivan's question, I was for sure you were going to say one of the artists wanted to do a kind of installation called 50 Shades of White. You know, that was like a reflection on the sort of cliche of, 100 Eskimo words for snow, something about the sort of variety of white. But I was thinking through your whole talk about when you first mentioned the problem of, or the constraint of the white walls, thinking about the art institution and thinking about the very particular decision to include a really wide diversity of forms, familiar and unfamiliar. And in a way, I'm channeling one of our colleagues, Sun Kai Po, who's a conservator and who was going to be on the panel and then got called out to a meeting. But we were talking about this. And were there any moments in the assembling of the diversity of material, were there any moments sort of behind the scenes, maybe even with collections managers and conservators, about how material would and wouldn't be conserved, treated, handled, that pushed up against those boundaries of the kind of institution it is? And you mentioned the rug, the wool sealskin rug that couldn't be touched, and the platform that shouldn't be walked on but was. So I'm thinking just in terms of the kind of cultural stances towards the diversity of materials in the show. Were there any conversations that happened there that push against the art framing at all?
Well, the WAG team here in the Preparators, they're all artists themselves. And so it's probably one of the best teams that I've ever had the good fortune to get to work with. And no, there was never a time where they said like, absolutely not, you can't do that, except for when we wanted to put the Sealskin Spacesuit right up against that ledge wall. And they said, no, because that could be a step to some kid falling over the edge of the wall, which of course, like safety concerns. Yes, that is something that they flagged and we did not do. And we're like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good idea. But other than that, no, I mean, when we said like, we want to recreate Zacharias Kunuk's hunting shack and we need to recreate Lindsay McIntyre's grandmother's living room, instead they were like, okay, what do you think about this material? We could do this. How do you like the stain on this building? Does it look like a weathered building to you? I think they actually had a lot of fun with the installation of this exhibition. And, of course, this is not the first Inuit exhibition at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. They've been doing this for 30 years. And so getting as many things that could be not out from underneath the glass, I think that was really special. The things under glass are the things that could fit in your pocket, basically, and so inside your coat. And so everything else, we really did our best to make it accessible and use that sort of what Nicole designed were sort of black ice, like we call them the sexy plinths, like these black slick plinths to just kind of put a bit of space between people and the works themselves. But no, the Preparators were incredible. It was fun. It was a fun process. I think maybe also coming out of COVID and getting into the new building and getting to, we had there was multiple cranes. One of them looked like it should have been on Star Wars. Like it's this big thing that kind of walks into the space. So I think we were all having fun playing with all the fun installation toys and stuff.
Yeah. No, your enthusiasm for the work and also for the process is clear. They go hand in hand. So I just want to say thank you again, Heather, for being with us here today and giving us this amazing overview and into this really inspiring project. Helen and I were chatting, like we have to go, we have to get to Winnipeg before it closes. So like there's a lot of things we want to see in person, as much as I'm looking forward to also exploring the audio guide. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thanks to the audience. Thanks to the audience for being with us today. We hope to see you at future events. You can visit our website for more information. Please, in your own way, join me again in thanking Heather, and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.